He was forced to marry a woman 30 years older. No one expected what happened next. The twin suns of Arkin Ridge scorched the red desert, painting the horizon in gold and copper. The wind carried a faint hum from distant power lines and the soft, metallic scent of herded bio cattle. Elias Ward adjusted the brim of his dusty hat and squinted at the horizon, scanning for a broken drone lying somewhere near the grazing herd. His boots sank slightly into the red sand as he walked, each step measured and careful. Life on this frontier planet had taught him patience and precision, skills more important than strength when working alone. Elias had come to be known in the scattered settlements as a quiet man, one who did his work without seeking attention. He repaired old ranch drones, helped with cattle migrations, and always offered a hand where needed. But now, for the first time in his life, he faced a situation that no manual, no lesson, and no past experience could prepare him for. The ruling council had arrived 2 days ago, hovering in sleek, low-orbit vessels that cast long shadows over the settlement. Their message had been blunt. A marriage had been arranged. Not a love match, not a choice, but a command. Elias was to marry Lady Saria, a woman 30 years older, a leader from a neighboring alien clan. The purpose was political, a demonstration of trust between humans and the alien settlers, but to Elias it felt like a sentence. He had heard the whispers in the settlement streets. Poor Elias, some muttered. 30 years older. That will be the end of him. Others laughed outright, imagining the awkward ceremonies and uncomfortable silences. But Elias did not respond to ridicule. He only nodded to himself and prepared. The first time he saw Saria in person, he understood why people feared her. She was tall, her posture rigid, her eyes sharp and calculating. Her hair, streaked with silver, fell over broad shoulders, framing a face that had survived battles and betrayals. Scars ran along her hands and forearms, telling silent stories of loss and survival. Despite her years, she moved with grace and every step carried authority. Elias Ward, her voice rang out as he approached. It was calm, yet carried the weight of command. I am Lady Saria. You will come with me now. He inclined his head politely. Yes, ma'am. No further explanation came. The silence in the desert stretched between them like an unspoken challenge. Elias could sense her judgment and perhaps a hint of doubt. He did not flinch. Instead, he focused on small practicalities. The condition of the hover craft waiting nearby, the weight of their supplies, and the sun's position for navigation. The journey to her territory was long and harsh. The desert landscape seemed endless, filled with jagged rocks, dry riverbeds, and fields where the wind carried the hiss of distant machinery. Elias took point, scanning for dangers while Saria remained quiet, seated with a straight back, eyes fixed on the horizon. At night, under the glow of twin moons, they made camp. Elias set up the shelter, checked the equipment, and prepared food for both of them. Saria did not ask for help, yet allowed him to serve. She ate in silence at first, then gradually asked questions about his work, the settlements, and the bio-cattle he tended. Elias answered simply, avoiding elaborate stories or excuses. He spoke as he always did, honestly, with no attempt to impress. Saria listened carefully, her sharp eyes softening slightly as she noted his respect for the land, for life, and for responsibilities many men his age ignored. As the journey continued, they encountered dangers. A sudden sandstorm forced them to take shelter, and scavenger drones circled overhead, suspicious of travelers. Elias' calm actions, setting up protective shields and rerouting the drones, earned a grudging respect from Saria. When she saw him calmly repairing a damaged hover engine in the middle of a dust-filled storm, her expression flickered, just for a moment, with surprise. By the second week, Saria began to reveal pieces of her own story. She spoke of past betrayals, of battles lost and alliances broken. She admitted her people had grown wary of outsiders, and that previous attempts to maintain peace had failed. Elias listened without judgment, offering practical solutions when needed, and asking questions only to understand. The desert sun had faded many times, replaced by the cold glimmer of twin moons, and still they rode together. Elias noticed how Saria's shoulders relaxed slightly in his presence, how her eyes, often so sharp, softened when she watched him tend to the livestock or repair a broken communications array. He did not seek her approval, but his actions, small as they were, spoke louder than words. One evening, after another long day crossing a canyon filled with shifting sands, they found a shallow oasis. Elias filled water containers and set up a small campfire. Saria watched him quietly, then asked, "Why do you care so much about machines and cattle?" He shrugged lightly, then answered honestly, "Because they need help. Someone has to care for them. Life here is hard enough. If we don't help where we can, things fall apart." She nodded slowly. "Many humans I've met would have ignored this land or stolen from it. You care differently." Elias looked at her, meeting her gaze evenly. "I do what I can. Same for people, same for the land." There was silence after that, but it was no longer heavy or uncomfortable. It was a quiet understanding forming between them, a bridge being built across the chasm of years and expectations. The journey was not easy. They passed through canyon passages where the winds threatened to sweep them off course, through areas where rogue scavengers and desert creatures could attack without warning. Elias' patience, skill, and calm judgment kept them safe. Saria, who had once doubted the young human's abilities, began to trust his instincts, realizing that his quiet strength was more valuable than any display of brute force. By the time they neared her settlement, whispers from distant alien observers had begun to change. Rumors shifted from mockery to curiosity. The young human and the older clan leader, traveling together, surviving storms and desert hazards, slowly gaining the respect of those around them. The first part of their journey ended on a ridge overlooking Saria's settlement. Lights flickered in the distance, powered by ancient energy cores and the faint glow of controlled biofields. Elias adjusted his hat, looking at the colony that was now both home and stage for what would be a politically charged marriage. Saria stood beside him, silent for a moment, then said, "You've surprised me, human. I did not expect competence, let alone calm, from someone so young." Elias merely nodded, humble. "I do what I can, that's all." Her lips curved slightly in what could almost be considered a smile, though it was fleeting. "Tomorrow we will face the council and the clan. I expect this journey has prepared you, but remember, the real challenge is not the land. It is them." Elias looked out at the settlement, lights twinkling in the night, and felt a strange sense of anticipation. He did not know what the future held, nor did he assume it would be easy. But he understood one thing clearly. Respect, patience, and steady action could speak louder than any title or decree. As they settled for the night under the twin moons, the wind whispered across the desert plains, carrying promises of trials, challenges, and surprises that neither human nor alien could yet imagine. And for the first time, Elias realized that this forced marriage might not just be a burden. It might be the beginning of something unexpected, something powerful, and something that could change not only his life but the lives of those who had watched and judged him from afar. The stars above Arkin Ridge shimmered with silent approval as he finally closed his eyes, knowing that the true test had only just begun. The morning sun rose over Saria's settlement, casting long shadows across the polished biometal walls and the soft, red sands. Elias stirred first, careful not to wake Saria. He packed the remaining supplies and checked the hovercrafts that had carried them across the desert. Each machine hummed softly, powered by old but reliable energy cores. He ran his hands over the controls, making minor adjustments. In these quiet moments, he felt at home, not because of the land itself, but because he knew how to care for it, how to work with it, rather than fight against it. When Saria finally joined him outside, her expression was unreadable. She stood tall, her silver-streaked hair catching the sun. "The council expects us in the main hall within the hour," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a trace of tension beneath it. "The clan elders are not forgiving of mistakes, and your presence is under scrutiny." Elias nodded, adjusting his hat. "I understand. We'll face them together." They entered the settlement along the main boulevard, lined with energy lamps and defensive turrets. Residents peeked from behind structures and alleyways. Some looked skeptical, others curious. Elias could feel the weight of their eyes, measuring him, testing him, judging whether he was worthy to stand beside Saria. He ignored the whispers. He focused on the path, on Saria's subtle cues, and on the safety of both their lives. The council hall was a large, domed structure, filled with alien elders and humans chosen to represent the settlements. It smelled faintly of ozone and desert herbs, a combination that signaled both technology and tradition. Saria led Elias to the front, where the elders waited in a semicircle. Each elder's eyes carried decades of judgment and authority. Some watched him with suspicion, others with thinly veiled amusement. Elia's ward, the lead elder began, his voice resonant. You have traveled far to meet Lady Saria. This union is not a choice of love, but a binding commitment to peace and cooperation. Tell us, young human, why should we trust you? Elias swallowed, keeping his expression neutral. I do not seek power, I do not wish to impress. I only wish to do what is right for her, for the clan, and for the land. If trust is earned through action, I will earn it, not by words. A murmur spread across the hall. Some elders exchanged skeptical looks, others seemed intrigued. Saria's eyes softened just slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of Elias' honesty. She placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, not as a command, but as a quiet reassurance. The morning passed in tense discussion, the elders questioning both Elias and Saria about past alliances, threats from outside factions, and the responsibility that came with leadership. Elias answered simply and directly, never faltering. His calm, practical responses contrasted with other humans who often flustered easily in front of authority. After the council meeting, Saria guided Elias through the settlement. They visited workshops, irrigation fields, and livestock enclosures. Elias noticed the condition of each structure, noting repairs that could prevent disaster. He suggested minor improvements, changes to water flow, and adjustments to defense turrets. Why do you care so much about details? Saria asked during a quiet moment near the animal pens. Because details keep people alive, he replied simply. Small mistakes can cost lives here. You taught me that. I'm just making sure we do what we can to survive. Her eyes lingered on him, thoughtful. Many humans would see this land as harsh and not worth the effort. You see it differently. I see it as home, Elias said, even if it isn't mine. Saria said nothing for a moment, but her expression was softer than before. Perhaps she realized that Elias' strength was not in brute force, but in calm intelligence, observation, and quiet determination. Later, as they worked together on a damaged water pump, a warning alarm suddenly blared. Sensors detected a nearby faction approaching, hostile, armed, and reckless. The settlement had few defenses in the area, relying largely on strategic placement and quick response. Elias' hands moved quickly, shutting down vulnerable circuits and rerouting energy to shields. Saria barked orders at her own people, while also following Elias' suggestions for optimal placement of defensive turrets. The attacking faction arrived, but they were met with an unexpected organized resistance. Turrets activated with precision, shields held steady, and alarms guided the settlement residents into safe positions. Elias coordinated drones and livestock barriers, turning the herd into a distraction that slowed the attackers' approach. The battle was brief but intense. The faction retreated, leaving minor damage behind. Yet the impression they left was clear. Elias, the young human, had contributed decisively to the settlement's defense. For the first time, some of the skeptical elders began to nod in approval. After the skirmish, Saria approached Elias. You handled that well, she said, her voice carrying a mixture of respect and surprise. I did not expect such coordination from someone so young. Elias shrugged, tired but steady. We all have skills, some just need to be used. The night fell and the settlement quieted. Stars twinkled above Arkin Ridge and twin moons rose, casting pale silver light across the red sands. Saria and Elias sat near the campfire outside the main hall. The air was calm now, the tension of the day fading. Tell me about your people, Saria asked softly. The humans who live on these frontier planets. I have only known diplomats and traders, not those who work the land like you do. Elias spoke slowly, choosing words carefully. He told her about the scattered settlements, about people surviving in harsh conditions, about alliances and conflicts that came and went. He spoke of trust, patience, and respect as the currency that kept settlements alive. Saria listened, absorbing the details, occasionally asking questions. She spoke in return, revealing fragments of her own life, her fears of losing control, her concern for her clan, and her frustration at being underestimated because of her age. Elias listened without judgment, offering only understanding and practical insight when needed. You make it sound simple, Saria said after a long pause, but it never is. No, Elias agreed. But it becomes simpler when people work together and do what they can, instead of what they think they should. Rules mean nothing if they can't be applied to survival. For the first time, Saria smiled, a brief, quiet acknowledgement of something she had never expected to feel with a human. There was no romance, No foolish flirtation, only the recognition of competence, respect, and shared purpose. Days passed, and the settlement began to see Elias differently. He was no longer just the young human forced into marriage. He was a partner, someone who listened, contributed, and proved himself through action rather than words. Even some of the more skeptical clan members began to treat him with quiet respect, though some still whispered about the unusual age gap. One morning, while inspecting a distant water field, they discovered a hidden problem. A group of scavenger drones had been feeding on the settlement's power lines, slowly draining energy reserves. Elias studied the devices carefully, then formulated a plan. Using small, portable shields and clever redirection of the herd, he managed to lure the drones away and capture them. The settlement avoided a potential energy crisis, thanks to his ingenuity. Saria observed silently, noting his resourcefulness. "You think of everything," she said. "I only try to," Elias replied, checking the final adjustments on the trap. The first real challenge of trust had passed, but the larger struggle remained. Outside forces still threatened the settlement. Rumors of political manipulations and rival factions loomed. The marriage, originally considered a punishment, had started to become a symbol of potential unity. As the twin suns set behind the distant cliffs, Elias and Saria stood together on a ridge overlooking the settlement. A soft wind blew across the sands, carrying the scent of ozone and desert herbs. They were quiet, yet the silence was not heavy. It was filled with understanding, shared purpose, and a sense of anticipation for challenges yet to come. Elias thought about the journey ahead, the political meetings, the potential attacks, and the constant need to prove himself. But for the first time, he did not feel burdened. He had found a way to survive not just through strength, but through thought, care, and partnership. Saria placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Tomorrow, we face the council again, and this time we must show them that this union is more than obligation. It is possibility." Elias nodded, feeling a strange sense of confidence. He had survived the desert, the storms, and the first test of his skills. Now he was ready to survive something far more complex. Earning trust, navigating politics, and standing beside a woman 30 years his senior who had already taught him more than he expected. The stars of Arkin Ridge glittered in silence, as if watching the young cowboy and the seasoned leader from afar. Somewhere in the distance, life continued to stir. The desert was alive, unpredictable, and waiting. And Elias knew that, whatever happened next, he would face it with steady hands and a steady heart. The second part of their journey ended here, not with resolution, but with preparation, anticipation, and a growing bond that neither expected. An understanding that strength did not depend on age, but on trust, courage, and shared purpose. The day began with a quiet tension. The settlement of Saria's clan had grown accustomed to the unusual presence of Elias Ward, the young human forced into marriage. Yet despite their grudging respect, suspicion lingered. Leaders of the neighboring clans had heard rumors of the alliance and whispered that the human might be a weak link, or worse, a spy. Elias felt the weight of their scrutiny, but met it with the same steady calm that had carried him through the desert and past council scrutiny. Saria walked beside him through the central plaza, her eyes scanning the movement of her people. "You have done well so far," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The elders see your actions, but the clans beyond our walls do not. They watch for weakness. You must prove yourself to them as well." Elias adjusted his hat and nodded. "I will, but strength alone is not enough, is it?" "No," Saria admitted. "They respect power, but they trust actions." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert from the perimeter. Drone sensors had detected unknown travelers approaching from the South Ridge. They moved fast, their machines cutting the air with low hums. Saria's people tensed. This part of the territory had always been vulnerable, and scouts had reported increasing activity from outside factions in recent weeks. Elias examined the readings on a portable display. They're moving in formations designed to intimidate. Not an attack yet, but likely testing defenses. He looked up at Saria. "If we respond too aggressively, it could escalate, too passively, and it might embolden them." She studied him, realizing that his calm approach reflected his understanding, not fear. "Then we prepare," she said. "We show them we are capable without giving them the satisfaction of fear." Together, they coordinated defensive strategies. Elias suggested placing mobile energy shields along the ridge and using the herd of bio-cattle as a natural barrier. Saria assigned her warriors to strategic posts, while Elias coordinated drone patrols and checked equipment readiness. Within an hour, the settlement's defenses were optimized, blending alien technology with frontier ingenuity. The travelers arrived at midday, their hover vehicles glinting under the twin suns. Their leader, a grizzled man from a rival human settlement, dismounted with a group of heavily armed escorts. He smirked at the sight of Elias standing beside Saria. "So this is the young human they've paired with your elder, Saria," he called out. "I expected a boy, not someone who looks like he might survive out here." Elias met his gaze evenly. "I survive because I pay attention. Actions matter more than appearances." Saria stepped forward, her presence commanding. "We do not wish for conflict, but we will defend our home. Your intentions are clear to us. Ours are clear to you." The rival leader laughed but did not attack. Instead, he issued a challenge, a test of cooperation and resourcefulness. He had noticed the settlement's defenses and wanted to gauge whether the human and the alien leader truly worked as partners. The challenge was simple in concept but difficult in execution. Transport a convoy of supplies across the canyon terrain while avoiding environmental hazards, rogue scavengers, and potential ambushes. Elias and Saria accepted. They divided responsibilities. Elias planned routes, set up diversion points for potential attacks, and monitored environmental sensors. Saria coordinated the warriors and livestock, ensuring that every unit moved efficiently and safely. Together, they transformed what seemed like a daunting test into a demonstration of unity. The convoy began its journey, moving carefully through rocky passes and shallow ravines. Wind gusts threatened to knock drones off course, and pockets of quicksand hidden beneath dust required precise calculations. Elias guided the convoy with calm efficiency, adjusting the timing of each unit to avoid hazards. Saria's warriors moved with him, trusting his judgment despite their initial doubts. Midway through the journey, trouble struck. A group of scavenger drones, aggressive and malfunctioning, descended from a nearby cliff. They attacked the convoy, targeting the transport vehicles. Elias acted quickly, redirecting energy from the shields to the vulnerable sections while using the herd to create a moving barrier. The drones collided with the cattle enclosures, giving the convoy enough time to continue safely. Saria watched Elias' actions carefully. "You think like a strategist, not just a cowboy," she said. Elias shrugged. "Survival requires both." By the end of the first day, the convoy reached the safety of a narrow canyon pass. The rival leader, observing from a distance, nodded in acknowledgement. The test was far from over, but it had begun to shift perceptions. The clans watching now whispered not of weakness, but of competence. The young human had proven he could think, act, and survive alongside their respected elder. That evening they made camp in a hidden canyon grove. Fires flickered against the rocky walls, casting dancing shadows. Saria and Elias sat apart from the others, taking a moment to reflect. "You handled today well," Saria said, her voice low. "I doubted at first, as you know. But your calm, your planning, it saved lives." "I only did what seemed right," Elias replied. "We both had a role to play. Your leadership guided the warriors, and I guided the tools and terrain. Together we succeeded." She nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Perhaps that is what people fail to see in these alliances. Strength alone does not save lives. Strategy, respect, and cooperation do." The night was quiet, filled with the sounds of the desert, wind moving through rocky canyons, distant calls of alien creatures, and the soft breathing of bio-cattle. Elias noticed a change in Saria. She no longer regarded him as just a human assigned to her. She began to see him as a partner, someone capable of complementing her leadership rather than undermining it. The next day brought another challenge. Scouts reported that rival factions were spreading rumors, attempting to undermine Saria's authority by claiming the marriage was a sign of weakness. Elias suggested a bold plan: show strength through collaboration, not confrontation. He proposed a joint exercise with neighboring clans, sharing resources, combining patrols, and creating a visible network of support. Saria agreed, trusting his judgment. Together, they organized a coordinated demonstration. Humans and aliens worked side by side, moving supplies, tending cattle, and reinforcing defenses. The exercise was efficient, disciplined, and impressive. Observers from nearby settlements witnessed the young human and the elder leader working seamlessly together. It was a living proof that the marriage was more than political. It was a partnership that strengthened the settlement. By the evening, the rival leader from the previous day approached once more. This time, his tone was respectful. "I see now that the union was not a mistake. You are more than capable, young man, and the lady beside you, she chose wisely." Elias inclined his head, acknowledging the words without pride. Saria's expression was unreadable, but Elias could sense approval beneath the calm exterior. As they returned to the settlement, the twins' sun setting behind them, Saria spoke quietly. "You have changed the perception of this union, not because of charm or words, but because of action." Elias smiled faintly. "Actions are easier to judge than words. People will trust what they see." That night, as they walked through the quiet settlement streets, Saria reflected on the past weeks. She had expected compliance, duty, and perhaps frustration. What she had not expected was a human who could act with thought, patience, and courage equal to her own. She saw now that age mattered less than wisdom, trust, and mutual respect. Elias and Saria spent hours discussing plans for the settlement, strategizing defenses, and improving systems. They discovered that working together brought a rhythm neither had experienced alone. Where Elias saw practical solutions, Saria added insight from experience. Together, they found paths that neither could have discovered independently. By the end of Part 3, the settlement's perception had shifted. The forced marriage, once mocked and questioned, now symbolized possibility, strength, and collaboration. Elders and outsiders who had doubted Elias' capabilities began to view him as a stabilizing force, a human who could complement Saria's leadership and help guide the clan into a safer, stronger future. But the final test was still ahead. Larger threats loomed, political challenges remained, and the pair would need to demonstrate that trust and cooperation could withstand not just external threats, but betrayal, ambition, and unforeseen dangers. Elias stood with Saria on the highest ridge, looking out at the settlements below, the desert stretching endlessly beyond. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. Planning, preparation, and trust will carry us." Saria nodded, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "Then let the others watch. Let them see the strength that comes not from age or power alone, but from unity." The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in a fiery glow. The future was uncertain, full of challenges yet to come. But Elias and Saria had begun to prove something important. That partnership, respect, and courage could forge unexpected strength, strong enough to challenge prejudice, fear, and even the harshest dangers of Arkin Ridge. And in that moment, standing side by side, they realized that the real journey was only just beginning. The twin suns of Arkin Ridge rose slowly over the settlement, painting the desert red with streaks of gold. Elias Ward stood on the ridge, overlooking the plains and distant hills. Beside him, Saria observed the horizon with a calm, calculating gaze. The air was thick with anticipation. Rumors from distant clans had reached them, and scouts reported unusual activity near the northern passes. "Something is coming," Saria said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not just scouts. This feels like preparation for an attack." Elias nodded. "Then we prepare, not just to survive, but to show them strength through unity, not fear." The settlement stirred as people readied themselves. Warriors checked weapons, hovercrafts were lined up for rapid response, and energy shields hummed with power. The livestock, trained to respond to alerts, moved calmly under careful guidance. Elias moved among them, directing repairs and organizing patrols, his presence steadying the nervous residents. Despite the preparations, tension lingered. Some still whispered about the unusual marriage. 30 years separated Elias and Saria, and even with respect and action, many struggled to believe that a young human could stand alongside a seasoned clan leader. But Elias and Saria knew that perception mattered less than results. They worked together seamlessly. Where Saria's experience guided the warriors, Elias' strategy ensured efficient use of resources, environmental advantages, and coordinated defenses. Together, they created a plan that relied on both intellect and courage. By midday, scouts reported the approach of a large force, a coalition of rival clans and mercenaries, drawn by rumors of weakness and the potential for plunder. The coalition's leader was a tall, hardened man from a human settlement across the northern canyon. He had brought skilled fighters, advanced drones, and a reputation for ruthlessness. Elias and Saria reviewed the terrain carefully. The northern canyon offered both risks and opportunities. Narrow passages could funnel attackers, but they could also trap the settlement's own defenders if mismanaged. "We can use the canyon to our advantage," Elias said. "Force them into narrow paths, slow their movement, and split their forces. But we must coordinate carefully. One mistake and they could overwhelm us." Saria nodded. "Then we will move as one, warriors, drones, and livestock alike. Every element has a purpose. Every person must act without hesitation." The battle began in the late afternoon. Dust rose as attackers advanced, their machines kicking up clouds across the plains. Drones hummed overhead, scanning for weak points, while mercenaries moved with precision. Elias and Saria's forces responded immediately. Energy shields were deployed in staggered formations, creating corridors for defenders to move while forcing attackers into narrow channels. Elias guided drone patrols, redirecting them to intercept enemy scouts, while Saria directed her warriors to guard flanks and critical points. The bio-cattle, trained to respond to threats, moved strategically, creating living barricades that slowed the enemy and protected key positions. The first clash was intense. Lasers and energy pulses lit the canyon, dust swirling in thick clouds. Yet Elias and Saria's coordination held firm. Each defensive position complemented the next, forcing the attackers to pause, reorganize, and rethink their strategy. At one point, the coalition leader attempted to break through a ridge where the settlement's defenses were weakest. Elias noticed the pattern and signaled to Saria. Together, they directed a countermove. Drones pushed from above, warriors flanked from the sides, and the herd created a natural barrier in front of the attackers. The coalition force was slowed, disorganized, and eventually forced to retreat temporarily. Saria watched Elias with a mixture of pride and respect. "You see patterns others miss," she said as they coordinated the next defensive wave. "I only pay attention," he replied calmly. "Observation keeps us alive." Hours passed. The battle continued as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Dust clouds and smoke created a surreal twilight, with silhouettes of humans, aliens, and machinery moving in tense coordination. Both sides suffered losses, but the settlement's defenses held, and the attackers' morale began to falter. Finally, the coalition regrouped for a last attempt. They targeted the central plaza, where the settlement's energy cores were housed. Elias and Saria moved quickly, reinforcing shields, redirecting power, and preparing countermeasures. The central plaza became the focal point of the final clash. Elias deployed drones strategically, using their sensors to predict enemy movements. Saria directed warriors to guard critical points, while Elias managed the coordination of livestock as living obstacles. The attackers charged, but the settlement's defense was prepared. Lasers and energy shields met the advance, and the canyon's natural terrain trapped many of the coalition's forces. In the midst of the chaos, Saria was cornered by a skilled enemy leader. Elias saw the danger and acted immediately, using a hovercraft to block the attackers' advance. Together, they managed to neutralize the threat without injury. The combined action of human ingenuity and experienced leadership proved decisive. By nightfall, the coalition had been forced to retreat. The settlement remained intact, the people safe, and the attackers humiliated. Rumors of the young human and the elder leader spread quickly across the northern settlements, earning Elias respect and acknowledgement previously denied to him. As the dust settled, Saria and Elias stood together on the ridge overlooking the plains. The settlement glowed softly in the twilight, the lights reflecting off the metal structures and the still-moving herd. "You did well," Saria said quietly, "not just in battle, but in earning the trust of your people and mine." Elias looked out over the plains. "We did it together, that's what matters." For the first time, Saria allowed herself a small smile. 30 years of experience had taught her caution and control, but Elias' calm and intelligence had proven equally valuable. She realized that leadership was not about age alone, but about collaboration, trust, and courage. The following days were spent repairing damages, strengthening defenses, and reinforcing alliances with neighboring clans. The young human who had been forced into a political marriage had now become a symbol, not of obligation, but of unity and strength. Elders who had doubted him spoke with respect, while younger warriors and settlers looked to him for guidance. Elia's and Saraya's partnership continued to grow. They shared plans for future security, strategies for trade and resource management, and lessons in survival. Where Saraya provided experience, Elia's offered observation, creativity, and steady calm. The unusual age gap, once a source of doubt, became irrelevant. What mattered was action, respect, and the willingness to face challenges together. One evening, as twin moons rose over the desert, they walked along a ridge, watching the settlement below. The wind carried the scent of desert herbs and ozone, a reminder of the harsh but beautiful land they protected. "Do you ever think people will understand this marriage?" Elias asked softly. Saraya considered. "They may never understand it fully. But they will see what we can achieve together. That is enough," he nodded. "Actions over words." They sat in silence, watching the stars and reflecting on the journey. The desert had tested them, the councils had judged them, and the enemy had challenged them. Yet they had survived, strengthened not just by leadership or power, but by partnership and trust. As the night deepened, they returned to the settlement. The people slept safely, the lights of the plaza still shining softly. Outside, the desert was quiet but alive. Distant creatures moved through the shadows, and the wind whispered across the plains, carrying with it the promise of future challenges and opportunities. Elias knew the true test was not over. Political threats, environmental hazards, and rival factions still existed. But now he and Saraya were ready. They had proven that unity, courage, and mutual respect could overcome fear, doubt, and prejudice. In the quiet of the desert night, standing side by side, Elias and Saraya realized that what had begun as a forced marriage had transformed into something far greater, a partnership built on trust, action, and shared purpose. One that could face not only the challenges of Arkin Ridge, but any trial the universe might throw their way. And as the twin moons shone over the red sands, the settlement slept safely, knowing that its unusual leaders, a young human and a seasoned elder, were ready to face whatever came next together.